Where I see the opportunity is where agents have this abundance mindset, right? Where every day you wake up and it's an opportunity where agents are running their own business, they're entrepreneurs, and they have the ability to create success that day.
Hello, everybody. How are you? Welcome to our August edition of Real Talk. My name is Leigh and Clary. This is my co-host, Matthew Ferrara. For those of you who have missed our July episode, it was a really good one. I want to encourage you to go back and watch it. We had some amazing Homes for Heroes affiliates on talking about the power of pop buys and showing up in person for your clients to help generate new business and to help revisit some of your former connections. That material applied to all agents, not just Homes for Heroes agents. So I think there's really some good stuff in there. So if you haven't watched July, I want to encourage you to go back and watch July. Well, we are really excited to bring you our August edition. We have a very special guest with us today. Matthew, I'll turn it over to you to get us started.
All right, great. And I do want to remind everyone that while the July episode was filled with lots of good tips and ideas, don't forget that all the episodes are filled with lots of good stuff. So go back and check some of the earlier episodes if you have just started listening to our podcast or watching it on YouTube. We have tried to bring you some great value every time. So please do check out our earlier episodes and don't forget to tell a friend. I am excited for today's conversation. I think it is great timing to have this conversation. It's also a little bit of good luck. I happened to be in Southern California recently, bumped into my friend, and then we had an opening in the show schedule, and I said to Leanne, I know exactly who we have to have on this call. So I am super excited to welcome Kevin Van Eck to our podcast. And I want to just tell you a little bit about him, and then I'll have him fill in the blanks just a bit. He's the managing director of Maverix Advisory, which is one of the most amazing consultancies in the real estate industry. If you haven't had a chance to just check out what they're doing, follow them in their various social spaces, especially on LinkedIn. It is a great group of people. And in full disclosure, I do happen to be on their advisory board, but that's just as sort of like a little satellite brain trust contribution. The real work is done by Kevin and his partner, Jeff Kennedy. And so you guys should definitely check them out. But Kevin in his own right has an amazing background and history and great achievements in this industry. So Kevin, welcome to Real Talk and tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, for that glowing recommendation or glowing introduction. I really appreciate it. And yes, it was really sort of really fortuitous that we met in San Diego, and now I'm super grateful to be on this podcast. So thank you. And hi, Leanne. Thank you as well. And so I've been in real estate now for nearly 20 years. I got my license in 2007 and was an agent and a manager and a coach and a trainer. And then most recently an executive with a couple of large brands, one international luxury brand and then one regional brand. And as Matthew had said, made the move over to advisory work to take everything I had learned and everything I had learned from my mentors there and had experienced, where now I work with brokerages and networks and prop tech companies with a real focus on growth and efficiency and profitability.
Cool. Well, one of the things that you get to do that is so valuable in this business, a little bit of my career has been similar, is to see a lot of great strategies from a lot of different markets, from companies that have different goals, from people who are maybe new to the business to veteran organizations that have been around 100 plus years. You've also had opportunity to see our markets in North America from international perspectives and international markets from our perspectives. So basically, I think in a way, we're both sort of like bumblebees. We get to go around the industry, collect the best pollen, and cross-pollinate some really good ideas. And so the question I really want to kick off with for you is, this is a market in which we are seeing everything. We are seeing companies do better than ever. We are seeing agents have their best years ever. And we're seeing some people struggling, some people having some significant challenges. So let's kick off with what the big opportunities in a market like this, at least in North America, we'll just stay there for fun, are, and why now is a great time to be focused on those big opportunities while while the rest of the competitive landscape might not be seeing what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I think, and I love how you started that question with, we get to do these things, because it is a real opportunity to be able to take everything that we've learned, or that high level view, the 35,000 foot view, and be able to translate that into individual client work or brokerages and agents. I think, Matthew, like you, I am super optimistic. Always. I always think that there's opportunity in any market. So if we talk about the real estate industry, when there's disruption, there's opportunity, whether it's the consolidation that we see with brokerages, or whether it's the lack or reduction in the number of transactions overall within our markets. But I think that's a sign where where I see the opportunity is where agents have this abundance mindset, right? Where every day you wake up and it's an opportunity where agents are running their own business, they're entrepreneurs, and they have the ability to create success that day. And so when there's disruption, and goes back to when I first got into the industry in 2007, we all know what was happening just prior to the downturn and during the downturn. And there was this mix of sentiment across the industry where there was paralysis among some, and others that were taking the proverbial bull by the horns and really turning it into a sustainable business. And I think I'm going to translate it to today, because I think it's the same. I think it sounds cliche, but I think the biggest opportunity remains in relationships. I think that's the first thing that agents learn when they get into the industry. But a lot of times we forget about that and we focus on transactional. And especially when the market does become a little bit more difficult, and there's more stress in the market, we move towards the transactional. And so we begin really focusing on just getting a deal or getting a buyer or signing a listing, versus focusing on relationships, which we know drives referrals and continued and repeat business. So I think, at the risk of sounding like every other real estate book someone might have read, I think it all does go back to relationships. And the pendulum here, where there's been a big focus in technology and in efficiency and all of this, it can't be replaced. I think we're going to see real differentiation among agents based on the people they surround themselves with and the way that they make people feel and the service that they provide.
So Kevin, something that stuck with me was you said abundance mindset. And I wrote that down because mindset matters, because mindset controls your activities, right? And if you have that abundance mindset, you're going to approach your business with the proper activities, and you aren't, a scarcity mindset is a race to the bottom, right? We're all fighting for all these proverbial, whether it's leads or these shiny pennies or things like that. But having the abundance mindset, I really think puts you in the frame of mind to do the actions that are going to best move the business forward. So I think that was a good call out.
Agree completely. And I think there's so many distractions out there right now, whether it's scrolling on social media and hearing the news, and it's easy to become overwhelmed by the negative and to listen to all of the pundits and all of the influencers in real estate talking about the things that are happening, rather than coming in with the mindset that is, like you said, it's exactly right, what's going to drive your actions that create success that day.
So let me pick up on that for a second, because I love this. I'm going to call it a juxtaposition between having an abundance mindset focused on relationships and getting caught up in the scarcity mindset that is focused on the, anxiety provoking, struggle based approach to real estate. I mean, there really are two major camps forming in our business right now. I could wake up any single morning, there's another lawsuit. There's another article. There's another person on stage talking about more about what divides us than, what basically lifts all of our boats, if we want to use that metaphor. And I'm worried, right? After someone in my position, 35 years in this business, I'm worried that what's getting our attention is the loud, noisy negative, and not this optimistic, relationship-based mindset. So what I want to ask you is, how would one of our viewers wake up every morning and increase the likelihood that they focus on the right thing, right? What kind of daily activity, what kind of mindset prompt? We think about, we prompt technology to tell us something. How do we prompt ourselves to stay focused on the things that really matter and will lead us towards an abundance-based path, as opposed to getting caught up in the in the comment world, in the battles over things that probably in a year or two from now we won't even be thinking about, right? Those things are sort of temporary bee stings right now, but what will truly last are the relationships we nurture today and build in the long term. How does our audience keep themselves from getting caught up in that?
Yeah, I think it's small habits, right? So I'm not going to go all the way to, the 4 a.m. club or having this giant routine for 2 hours to start your day every day, because in reality, most of us are not going to be able to do that, right? So that's lofty goals. But I do think that small habits, like something as simple as not looking at your phone for the first hour, because we know you get sucked into social, and you look at the clock, and I know because I've done this and I do it and I have to walk myself out of it. But you say, okay, 5 minutes. How quickly does 5 minutes go when you're scrolling? Next thing you know, it's been 30. And what are you digesting? You're digesting someone else's content, and it could be those negative influences or the negative news or the headlines. And now that's framing how you approach every conversation the rest of the day. So I think the first habit is, try really hard for the first 30 minutes, 1 hour. Don't look at your phone, but then do something else with it. Do something productive. And something that I learned from Larry Kendall, who many of you probably know, I consider him one of my mentors, is really focus on digesting positive content. And that doesn't mean sticking your head in the sand and avoiding any of the news, but it does mean, what are you doing to improve yourself? And how are you adjusting, Leanne, to what you said, your mindset for that day, so that you are learning something new, elevating yourself, whether it's through knowledge or market information, or being able to frame it so you approach your day with the goal of making others feel good. I think that is something key that I learned, is that making others feel good, and we could talk about all the different ways to do that, but it has that reciprocal effect. It makes you feel good. And if in that day you look to make someone's life or someone's day that much better, just a little bit better, it's going to have a resounding or compounding effect.
So let me pick up on that. I'd love for you to give us maybe an example of an organization or an individual that you see that is living that kind of mindset. And here's what I mean. I love this concept. You mentioned Larry Kendall. For our viewers who don't know who that is, he's the founder of Ninja Selling, and one of the aspects that he always promotes is intentional consumption. If you are going to consume some information, what are you intentionally doing? I learned from that to go seek positive headlines, a couple each day, and then I actually try to turn that into something productive. At the end of every week, I produce a little Friday newsletter called Good News Friday, and it's just the list of all the headlines that I went looking for every day to make sure I was intentionally consuming positive things about the world, not just about our industry. So I took my activity and I turned it into something productive. What organizations, or what are you seeing out there as some examples of people who are out there putting out the good stuff, putting out positive ideas, putting out helpful, and even you say, well, they don't have to be Pollyannish, but overly optimistic things are actually hard to find in this business. Who's generating that kind of stuff? Give us an example of how easy it is, but also what it looks like.
Sure. I think that, number one, if we go back to consuming positive or one of my friends calls it self-help, all my self-help books. But they're really, to develop myself and my skills. And so every morning I'll read, call it 10 pages of a specific book. And for that, it's something that I feel good about. I've picked up new information, or if I'm rereading a book, that's helpful to me. In terms of finding other sources, there's good news out there. And I need to give kudos to you, Matthew, about the newsletter that you put out, because it really is hard sometimes to find a compilation of good, positive, feel-good news that leads to that optimism, and real optimism. But you can Google it. There are different good news newsletters that are out there. And there's even channels on Instagram that follow good news. So one I think of, and I don't necessarily need to promote this, but it's Tank's Good News. It's one that I always make sure pops up because it's sharing good stories. There's also another channel that he has that's more of the funny meme style. But really seeking those out to fill your brain with the positive so you feel like you can attack the day, so to speak. And
so let's say that we're doing that. Let's say that we're not only consuming better good news, but maybe even turning it into things to share with others, which is generally the case if we're consuming on social media. Maybe we translate it into our newsletter, etc. But let's talk about its impact on our actual business. Do you think today that buyers and sellers are actually, seeking, desperate for, to some degree, I would say, agents who can explain to them how things can be done, not can't be done, can explain to them why it's possible to move, not to have to wait for something to happen to move. I often feel as if we put out negative messaging in this business. We're always talking about interest rates being too much of this, right? Too high, for example, or inventory being too scarce. And as a result, we're kind of scaring consumers into doing nothing. Would a optimistic mindset, intentional consumption of positive news, and then turning that into your messaging, do you think that would help move some people off the sidelines and into the marketplace? Are companies actually, are they getting a benefit of being more optimistic than constantly focusing on what's going wrong? And how does this help an individual agent whose sphere of influence is looking to them for some encouragement to enter the market, not to just wait to put their dreams on hold until everything is magically perfect?
Right. I mean, you bring up a good point where we've said for decades, probably now, where we create our own market. So if we're out there saying that there's no inventory, there are no homes, we're immediately shutting down the opportunity, not for us, but for our consumers, for our clients. We're turning them off to an opportunity that might exist. So there's that piece. I also think if you look at headlines, and so let's take, any headline that contains a percentage, and it says 36% of homes are on the market 60% longer than they were. Yeah, but what about the 70, I'm not doing the math correctly, 77% of homes that aren't taking longer to sell? What about you could flip the headline so it's not so clickbaity, and not from the negative. And that actually gives people inspiration. And what do people want? People are attracted to people that are inspiring. People are attracted to the positivity. People are attracted. They want to work with people that create options for them, rather than, to your point, Matthew, and saying, you can't do this. This isn't happening. It's going to take 180 days, whatever the number, whatever the stat is. But what can we do? And so if you can frame it that way and open up the door for somebody to see the future and see where they might be able to move to or move from, that's really powerful, just strictly from a human behavior and attraction standpoint.
It's a great point.
I think there's a perception sometimes too that negative headlines are more attention grabbers, right? Like they'll get more readers and more eyes, and that we almost want to substantiate our own limiting beliefs by these negative headlines, right? So they're out there and they kind of multiply themselves, whereas the positive stuff gets buried and the comments start, and we know what happens when the comments start. So it's really easy to kind of have the positivity buried in all that. So I think we have to make it a conscious effort to bring that to the forefront of our minds.
I agree. And that has an impact on our actions too, going all the way back to the beginning and what we do each day. If we're reading that it's really difficult to sell a home or really difficult to find a home, you have agents then that in their minds are like, I don't want a buyer because I won't be able to find them a property. Or I don't want to work in this specific community because days on market are longer or list price to sale price ratio is lower, whatever it might be. So flip that headline into something positive, and that will create the opportunity. And if you can be the voice for the positivity, then you become more attractive, where people want to spend time with you and get to know you.
So this is an interesting angle. I like this angle because right now in my mind, I see a lot of people looking to external sources for their next, great level of success. I'm hoping that artificial intelligence will save the day. I'm hoping that the Federal Reserve will do something and spark a lot of demand. Always looking externally to forces that they not only can't control, but can't predict. And a lot of what you're saying really comes back. And I want to emphasize this phrase. I think what you said, I hope our viewers heard it, and I hope they hear it again, which is we create our own market. First, we start by coming to the market with the right attitude. We come to the market with the right mindset, and then we become a beacon of possibility for customers and even for colleagues in a way, right? Like we have to help the people around us in our office or that we might co-broke with continue to stay motivated and positive in the marketplace. Give us an example of some other things that aren't necessarily external to save the day. We don't have to worry about whether it's going to be technology or private equity or a competitor or something. What could our viewers do on a daily basis to create the kind of market they want to see, to create the kind of possibility that consumers would say, wow, I want to connect with this person and take advantage of now because they see something that really is different than what, large chunks of the business are saying are going wrong. They're saying this might be the time for something to go right.
Yeah, I think a big piece of it is, and we've mentioned it a couple of times, it's market data. So market data can be twisted any number of ways, as we said, with headlines or elsewhere. But I do think that a positive spin on the data that's available and becoming a student of the market so that it's not it doesn't come off as trying to be the agent that says it's always a good time to buy or sell. As we heard, no matter what's happening, it's always a good time. It's always a good time for somebody, right? And so that's where that abundance mindset comes from. It's not always a good time for everybody. It depends on them and their life and where they're at and their goals. But I think it's becoming a student of the data is number one. I think number two, and you touched on it, Matthew, I think it's agents forming, for lack of a better term, whether it's a support group or a mastermind, or because somebody in that group will have positive stories to share. So even if there are things happening in certain markets, it's that inspiration where you see other people within your office or other people across markets that are doing really cool things, and they're sharing good news and they have an abundance mindset. And it's just this flywheel that helps benefit everybody that's a part. And so from an education piece, but then also from that daily mindset, inspiration, we've got this, all with the goal of providing, great service and getting our people to where they want to go.
So Kevin, I love the idea of getting a group together of like-minded people who are all positive. I think it's super important to set the ground rules because we all know that once you get the pack mentality together, that could go negative very quick. And sometimes all it takes is one person who's had a bad day or had a deal fall through or something. And then all of a sudden, this group that you built to inspire you has you moving in the other direction. So I think it's important that you're disciplined to set strict ground rules with these groups that you get together, that you're going to keep it moving in a positive direction. And I think you can just lift each other up if you do that.
That's such a great point.
So, Leigh, and I have to put a shameless plug in here, obviously, at this point for Homes for Heroes, because, I follow a lot of different groups on social media. And I have to tell you, the number of times something comes up from some of these Asian groups where even me, Mr. Optimism, like you, Kevin, I try to look at the bright side as much as possible, but there are moments when I really do find myself challenged to keep in optimism in some of these groups. And then I scroll down the Homes for Heroes Facebook page, or something pops up about a little something one of our members is doing. And it does remind me that, hey, there are people who are doing real estate for more than just the deals, for more than just their market share, for more than just their, competitive standing. They're doing it for the right reasons because they want to make a difference. And something you said, Kevin, I want to connect that dot to, which is the importance of networking with the right people, birds of a feather, if you will, here. And so, you and I, the reason we're having conversation today, we just bumped into each other. I mean, we talk a lot anyways, but we bumped into each other at a conference. And what I loved about that conference, to be totally honest, is that one of the best parts of the conference was happening in the lobby. It wasn't only happening on stage, only happening in the sessions. I mean, I couldn't turn around without someone not only just saying something kind or nice, like so good to see you, or introducing me in some crazy way, and then me introducing them to someone. And it just felt like there was this really powerful magnetic source of not only optimism, but of kindness, of assistance to each other that was happening just in the lobby, right? Typically you can find some people giving advice, but what was more important to me was the people who were offering to give help, not just advice. Who can I connect you to? Who can I introduce you to? How can I help you achieve that thing that you were just explaining to me? For agents, this is critical. I think sometimes a lot of agents in our business, they are too isolated. They are not going to their office meetings. They are not going to their board meetings. They're not going to their MLS sponsored events or their company events. I mean, the companies that I get to work with out there, they are spending time, energy, money putting together these events, bringing in smart people like yourself to speak to them. And, 30, 40, 50% sometimes of people don't show up. You go to an event for an association that has 5,000 members and there's 250 people in the room, and you think, why isn't this standing room only, etc. Give our audience a little advice as to how important it is to show up, to be part of the conversation that's moving the market, not just at home trying to figure it all out in your own head. Even just going to the office might be that one step towards making your own market a little bit better.
Agree. If you think back every time I use this word pandemic, pre-pandemic, if you think back when the offices were full or there were more agents in the office, just think, you remember how much you could learn just by sitting there, just by being in that space and the conversations that happen. So I'm not going to be a proponent of everybody needs to go back to the office, every agent, if they're not on a showing or a listing presentation or whatever, that they must sit in the office. But I think agents are missing a huge part of the value of being part of this, of their office, of being a part of their association, of their MLS, and the opportunities that are out there. And I think you might agree with this, Matthew. I think a lot of times why agents don't go is because they had an experience where it didn't fit what they were looking for. But my challenge to agents would be, and managers and broker owners as well, because the same thing happens to them, is you have to go with intention, which is the word you used a little bit ago. You can't just show up at an event and expect to get something out of it if you don't go there with a specific purpose, reason in mind, specific people you want to talk with and get to meet, and pick up on information that's maybe being shared from on stage or from within the audience. So I think that's the same thing if we break it down smaller scale in the office. If you go to the office, don't just sit there and keep to yourself again. What are you going to do to bring your colleagues into the office as well? Create your own market, create your own mastermind group, bring people together so that you are not just spinning at home reading negative headlines by yourself. And so I think there's a real opportunity there for agents to feel like they're part of something larger, which this could also tie directly into Homes for Heroes, but being part of something larger than just themselves. They're one person who's working with buyers and sellers.
So let me just take that one step further, and then I'm going to ask you one more question for our time here today. But I would assume that what you've just said also applies to being present, showing up with the public, showing up with our sphere of influence, our customers and clients. Oftentimes agents say to me, well, open houses don't work, or going to networking events don't work, showing up at the town fair, those things don't work. And something you just said struck a chord to me. Well, if you showed up expecting only to get something, then it's not going to work. But if you showed up expecting to give something, then, karma is going to come back to you, right? That sort of law of attraction is going to bring it back to you. If I show up with the intention of, who can I help at this event? Who can I get engaged in this event? Who can I meet at this event? Who can I say a kind word to at this event? Not just, how do I get as many leads as possible, right? Like doing open houses is as much about just being part of the community as it is about how many leads can I convert into offers or buyer clients at this event. So I kind of think that this actually is a very fundamental practice. What you're reminding us of is show up with the right reason to be there. You'll not only get more out of that actual event, but you might translate that into more places in which you're now creating this ripple effect, this positive bounce back of good intentions now coming your way.
Agreed. I think that, so let's go back to 2008 or 2009. I had a good friend, and her name was Chris. And her and her husband became my number one referral source, even though we had never worked together on any of their transactions. They didn't buy or sell during the time that I was working with clients, but they became my number one referral source because they were super connectors. And this is where I learned exactly what you're saying, Matthew, is they would invite me to fundraisers. They'd invite me to events. And I initially started going by trying to meet as many people as possible and just trying to collect business cards and get contact information. And it's what you're saying, which is there was no meaning behind it. I was looking to get something. I was looking to get contact info so I could add them to my sphere and do who knows what later. Maybe nothing, but at least add them to a drip campaign and a direct mail campaign. And I shifted my mindset to where every time I went to an event with them, my goal was to have 2 meaningful conversations. That's it. Not try to meet 25 different people and gather as many business cards in a stack. It was all about having really a great connection with 2 different people, learning as much about them as possible, asking more questions than telling them about real estate or the market or what I did or do. And that, I think, was probably the hinge that led to Chris and Dan becoming my number one referral source, because it built credibility. It built trust. I really got to know somebody. And instead of just blind mailing somebody, now, because I had taken the time to learn from them and who they are and their needs are, whether it was 2 years from now or 5 years from now, we were connected.
It's interesting because what you're describing could be the attitude for so much of what we do in this business. Imagine if you showed up to a listing presentation. Sure, your goal is to hopefully leave with the client, but what if your goal were to make sure that those people knew whatever they needed to know to successfully position their home for sale, whether or not it was with you? Right? Imagine if you responded to a buyer who inquired online and you had a conversation that was about preparing that buyer for whatever they needed to do, whether or not it was with you. It's funny. I think about some of the greatest clients and relationships I've developed over the years, and I never prospected them. I just showed up and said, I see there's an opportunity for you. I'd like to help with that. Here's something to maybe start. I gave before I got, as they say. And it turned into like relationships that didn't require, I don't have to send them something every month. I don't have to remind them that I'm in business every month, right? It's one of those relationships because I became their fan first and then they became my fan, just like your friends. They weren't really a referral source for you. They were your fans, right? They were like, here's someone doing something good. Let's make sure there's more of Kevin in the marketplace than anyone we can, because that's how they were able to give something good. All right, we could keep going on this. I love this conversation, but I want to wrap up this segment. We'll have to have you back, I'm sure. But let me ask you this question. Let's take everything we've discussed so far. All right, let's come to each day with a positive mindset, one filled with abundance, focused on building relationships, and not only seeking to get something, but to give something. Okay, let's say that this, let's call it spirit of real estate that you are describing to us here, were to become even more abundant than the people that you and I and Leigh know. There are many people doing this now, but let's say this became more abundant in the next year. What are you hopeful for our industry in the next 12 months? Like, when you think about what's possible for us as both an industry and a slice of our society, what are you hopeful for our viewers individually, but also as an industry?
As an industry, I think we have a real opportunity to continue elevating the industry, but the role that real estate agents play. I think this is where, with AI, you brought up artificial intelligence earlier, with technology not replacing the relationship, not using it as a means to mass communicate more effectively, I think it's an opportunity for us to elevate ourselves, educate ourselves in ways we haven't been able to in the past, to become a better resource for consumers, to be able to share with them, to allow them to make better informed decisions, to be able to provide better service. And I know that's a vague term, but we can define that any number of ways, but to elevate the way that we interact with consumers, not just for job security or industry protection, but it really is, for what you said, being able to give, being able to serve. And so the opportunity is to elevate ourselves to a point where every agent treats this as a real business, as an entrepreneur, and they become masters of their craft rather than doing what some agents have been doing for a long period of time. I think technology and the efficiencies now allow us to focus on practice and research and education and being able to perform at a higher level in service of our consumers.
Leigh, I don't know about you, but I was just thinking back to one of our conversations a few sessions ago with Debbie Mayer, who basically reflects what Kevin was saying here, which is there's a bigger game afoot. And when you get better and you give better, you get better out of everything you're doing in your career. And I think that's a very, very similar message to what Kevin's sharing with us here today. Thanks for being with us, man. I'm going to turn it over to Leigh to wrap us up here today, but so glad to have an opportunity for you to share your wisdom with our audience.
Yeah, thank you so much to you both.
Yeah. I also want to thank you, Kevin. You've probably seen me taking a lot of notes over here. I also, so much of what we talked about, I think applies to just life in general, right? Of showing up with a good, positive mindset, ignoring the noise, having the abundance versus, scarcity mentality, and how that's really going to move your business forward. So yeah, we could talk about this for a long time, because that's what we should be talking about today and not all the negative stuff. So Kevin, you're awesome. We appreciate it. We'll have you back for sure. And thanks to all of our viewers for watching Real Talk. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can see more of our episodes. And we will see you in September.
You know that I feel good doing things I never